Hello there YouTube, it's your boy B3, back with another kicking graphic novel review. Today we're looking at an indie graphic novel, one that I was very excited for, but I'm just now getting around to reviewing it. I actually had some time to sit down and read it because I was getting my car realigned, and I was like, well, if I'm going to sit in the waiting room for an hour, might as well bring some graphic novels. And this is the first one I read. Soul War by Titanic Creations. Now you might be familiar with Titanic Creations. They kind of took the indie kaiju world by storm when they announced their Gorgo, Yongari, and Pulgasari action figures. We have reviewed their first release Pulgasari, their movie Gorgo, and their Yongari on this channel. And we have also reviewed their original Titanicus figure and their Nosferodon figure. Titanicus and Nosferodon are, of course, two of the kaiju featured in this. Yes, Titanic Creations doesn't just make figures of underrated kaiju, but they also have their own kaiju universe. And it's a very unique kaiju universe because it's very pulpy. It's a pulp adventure set during World War II. And if you've ever heard me talk about like the Shadow or the Phantom or anything on this channel, you know I love pulpy shit. If you don't know what a pulp story is, think Indiana Jones. That's kind of the main pulp character that everyone's familiar with now. He's not a character from the era of pulp stories, but he is a character that is a pulp story. They often take place during World War II, magical artifacts, creatures, often dinosaurs, and crazy tech, mystical stuff, and plenty of Nazis to punch. You gotta punch them Nazis. And there's plenty of Nazis punched in this, don't worry. So, let me read you the back of the book here, eh? From Titanic Creations comes Soul War, a story 5 years in the making. The year is 1942, 30 years after the events of Titanicus #0, and the world is at war. We join Wolf and Nosferodon as they search for Wolf's parents, who have been imprisoned by the Third Reich. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Field Marshal Rommel, the Desert Fox, has discovered how to raise the ancient superweapon, Scurius. Then, half a world away, a pathogen arrives from deep space, then threatens to destroy all life on Earth. Titanicus and our heroes will have their hands full as they try to save themselves, and all of humanity. From Mac McClintock, Titanicus 0 and Nosferodon #1, and Patrick McAvoy, Case Files, Arkham, GN. Well, GN stands for graphic novel. World War Kaiju, Lost in Space, and The Lost Adventures. Pretty cool. Ran about $20. It says rated M for mature, mostly for the blood. That's why. It's really just blood. You don't have to worry about like sex. There are some, maybe a couple slurs, but not the worst ones. It's mostly just violence that gets it the rating it has. It's just violence. No one's sucking kaiju dick or anything. But if you didn't get the Titanicus figure that came with the Titanicus 0 comic, or didn't get the Nosferodon figure that came with the Nosferodon issue 1 comic, there are recaps in the front of the book. Admittedly, I feel like they probably should have been collected in this. Titanicus #0 and Nosferodon #1 probably should have been just fully reprinted. They're very short. I don't think they would have increased the cost of this by much, but even if they did, it would have been worth it, right? Some people don't want action figures. Some people don't collect action figures, and that's fine. But some people collect indie comics, and they want to read indie comics, and maybe they don't want to buy an expensive indie action figure just to get a single issue of a book. And I feel like they understood that because they recapped them in here. I, of course, have both these issues, and I've actually done a video where I review Nosferodon #1. The Titanicus #0 hasn't gotten a dedicated video. I just kind of talked about it in the review of the figure. And I feel like they knew that a lot of people wouldn't buy the figures just to get these comics. And so that's why they recap them in the front. It's mostly just Titanicus is the iceberg that sunk the Titanic, and Nosferodon bonds with a young Jewish boy. They have kind of like a Heisei Gamera thing going on, except even more connected, like they can speak to each other and stuff. And he's off flying around with Nosferatu, and his parents are taken by the Third Reich. And he feels guilty about that, and he and Nosferatu are looking for them. But those damned Nazis are looking for stuff too. They're fucking around in German-occupied Egypt in 1942, and they find a big-ass stone tablet. And General Rommel, the Nazi bastard, goes to the stone tablet, and they pluck a big crystal from it, and he holds it while he says the name Skurius, which bonds him with the kaiju Skurius, who is like a giant black scorpion whose head is that of a cobra. It's a very simple but very effective idea, just an amalgamation of dangerous, venomous animals, make them real big. That's Kaiju Design 101, and I fucking love it. We also see Wolf and Nosferatu absolutely smash a fucking German convoy, just smack the shit out of them, and Wolf is kind of having sort of a Batman journey. His main thing is vengeance for his parents, and eventually it just becomes protecting people. You know? Same kind of thing Batman had in many continuities. So yeah, the Nazi bastard is just fucking around with Egypt. Titanicus awakens at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, and a young couple in love, the guy who is about to be shipped out and is being a bit of a sex creep, stumble upon this meteor, which infects them and turns them into these really creepy looking kid things. It's freakish. But Nosferatu senses the entity arrive, and he tells Wolf the story of the people who created him, how this creature landed on their planet, made two people. You know, in the original IDW Godzilla continuity, they have a new one now, but the original, which has only just been announced like a couple days ago at the time of recording this. I'm uploading this months after I recorded it, sorry about that. But in the original IDW Godzilla continuity, there are those two creepy twins that control Batra. It's kind of like this, but they're controlled by the kaiju instead of controlling the kaiju. They're controlled by Griffixis, which is like a big space griffin monster. It takes on the features of creatures it absorbs. So it, absorbs something that's kind of lion-like, like a cat, a big, not a jungle cat, more like a bobcat, and maybe something with wings, and then it kind of looks like a griffin. But from space. From space. And it starts eating people as well. We also see the return of Titanicus. He has this cool freeze breath attack. The blue beam shooting from his mouth invokes images of Godzilla, but it freezes things. Which, is an obvious attack for Titanicus to have. And I love it. I love it. And then we see Nosferatu and Wolf stop a train headed to a camp. They free all the people on it. And we see that Nosferatu feeds on evil souls, which is kind of partially where his name comes from. Nosferatu, like feeding on people. He feeds on people as well, but he only can eat evil souls. Those are the only ones he can absorb. I don't think he could absorb a good soul if he tried, and even if he did, I don't think it would nourish him. But Nosferatu is kind of interesting. It's intentionally designed to look horrific and alien and monstrous. It's designed to look like a villainous kaiju, but it's a very heroic one. Nosferatu is definitely their Gamera. 100%. But Titanicus also echoes some Heisei Gamera as well. You can tell just by reading this whole thing that Heisei Gamera is a huge, huge inspiration on it. Like Griffixis invokes a little bit of Iris, and Skurius is kind of controlled in a similar way to with, what is it called? The little raptor claw looking thing in Guardian of the Universe that helps power up Gamera. There's a lot of Heisei Gamera influence in this, just straight up. Nosferatu is intentionally very villainous looking to kind of contrast his heroic nature. Anyway, this general Nazi fuck kind of thinks that he's a little better than Hitler now. He's getting all high and mighty, and he's kind of mutating. He has like these reptilian eyes, and he's getting all scaly and gross, and he's mutating to look more like the kaiju he controls. It's really influencing him. And we have Titanicus fucking around. Titanicus really is the Godzilla of this universe. A lot of his design invokes Godzilla in many ways. Spikes along the back, big kind of tail-dragging classic-y theropod. You could easily fit someone in a suit of Titanicus, and I know you could, because Titanic Creations has done it. And Titanicus is a really cool kaiju. He's kind of a environmentally protector kind of thing. He does invoke a lot of many of the modern Godzilla themes. Less so the originally shinny -1 kind of stuff. More like the Legendary Comics, maybe Heisei Millennium kind of Godzilla. Did I say Legendary Comics? Well, I guess that's true. I meant Legendary Pictures, but Legendary Comics Godzilla as well, yeah. But also, he seems to be a bioweapon. It is hinted that he is a bioweapon made by an ancient civilization. That civilization appears to be Atlantis. And remember, Gamera is a bioweapon made by an ancient civilization that inspired the myth of Atlantis in the Heisei series. Once again, this is very Heisei Gamera. Which is a good thing, because Heisei Gamera is some of the best that the kaiju franchise has to offer. True. But Griffix is growing more powerful, as is Sciarius. God, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing all their names right. But Nosferodon and Wolf break up a Nazi camp, so Wolf can go in and see if he can find his parents. But he finds a Nazi wearing a golden watch that... Well, not a watch. It's a pendant. It just looks like a pocket watch, so I said that for some reason. With a picture of his family in it. He finds that around a Nazi's neck. His parents have already been killed by the Third Reich. They've been slaughtered, and they took their possessions, and they don't hold back on these Nazi fucks in this book. They make them the evil shits that Nazis are, and they fucking blow their brains out. We also see one of the park rangers that encountered Griffix, and survived, and then he is actually able to run a not yet Daikaiju-sized, just a normal kaiju kind of Griffixus away from a town before it can completely destroy it. And so he kind of gets semi-recruited by this world's secret organization, secret government organization. They're a lot like Monarch, honestly. But it's not like Monarch is anything original. You know what I mean? Like, we've seen this a billion times. And I guess that's because it works. But the organization in this is much more like the organization in Project Nemesis. If you've read Project Nemesis, the secret organization in that is one that focuses on monsters of any size. So Monarch is just Daikaiju, giant monsters. But the organization in here, much like the one in Project Nemesis in that world, actually, very much, look at cryptids, period. Like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, they're for all that. So Titanic Creations, at some point, could do a book about smaller monsters if they wanted. I like that they kind of set that up in this world, so that they could expand to smaller monsters if they wanted. Maybe they could do more Seijin-y stuff, Kaijin, whatever. But I kind of like it the way it is now, real pulpy. I really just, no matter what they do with their stories in the future, I hope that they keep the pulp. I really want that. And then this very, like, early Marvel Comics Jack Kirby-looking ass interdimensional being in something called the Soul Realm starts talking to Wolf. He's called the Soul Curator, and Wolf is able to pass into this Soul Realm, which is kind of like an afterlife that he can project into, and apparently it's possible for all humans to do this. They just have to have the right trigger, but being connected to Nosferodon makes it much easier for him, and he's kind of using it to escape the fact that he knows his parents are dead, and since he was off adventuring with Nosferodon, he kind of blames himself partially, and he's starting to blame Nosferatu. And since they're losing their connection because of that, they're both much more susceptible to death. Yeah, you hurt one, you kind of hurt the other, but as long as they're connected to the other, they can still heal. Once again, very Heisei Gamera, okay? Anyhow, Titanicus shows up to fight Skurius, but it's in Egypt, and it's very hot, and Titanicus's body is actually largely made up of ice, so his weakness is just fighting in warm places, which is not great for him. He does a lot of damage to our big venomous beastie, but eventually he is defeated. Not great. But our park ranger, Ranger Benson, as I said, was inducted into Serenity, which is the organization that looks for cryptids. It's got a big triangle logo. Connect those dots. But one of the guys is kind of racist. Benson is black. He's black. And this takes place in the 40s. You think race relations are bad today? Huh? So Benson, and I actually want to talk a lot about this. The reason he's a park ranger is because he wanted to help his community. He wanted to help people. But he didn't think becoming a police officer or joining the military were ethical things to do. Hear me out, okay? He argues that he is a black man. If he joined the police or the military, he would be supporting the very systems that oppress him. And you gotta admit, that's kind of right. He actually makes some very good points when he's talking about how he became a park ranger, because he's like, now a park ranger protects people from nature, all people, no matter what, protects people from nature, but also protects nature from people. Park rangers are truly neutral and do a lot of good. And at the time of recording this is when they all got fired in real life, by the way, including one I knew personally. Just FYI. Anyhow, he makes some excellent points. This was clearly a well thought out character and a well thought out philosophy for him, but there is a female agent and a male agent, and the male agent is a big bigot that doesn't want him around, and the female agent wants to give him a chance. She's down for it, but the male agent just wants to wipe his mind. There's like this superhuman among them who can influence people and wipe memory. He doesn't really speak or anything, but he doesn't seem to be a bad guy. He seems to use his powers pretty responsibly, and not always in the way that his superiors want him to use it, which is pretty dope. But we get to see kind of a smaller fight between Graphixus, who's not full-sized yet, and Nosferatu in the night sky. It's pretty cool. Nosferatu is pretty heavily injured in it, since he and Wolf are having relationship troubles. In all honesty. But Serenity ends up telling Benson that Titanicus Issue 0 and the events therefore are why they were founded. And then Wolf figures out that he can merge with Nosferatu even further to heal him, which he does, and Nosferatu has to kind of end up energy vomiting him out right before they kill a bunch of Nazis, you know. Classic stuff. But that Nazi piece of shit, excuse me, that Nazi piece of shit general that bonded with Skurius is like eating his own soldiers, and he has this like Egyptologist with him, and the Egyptologist is proving useful, but you can see like it's very clearly the whole bad guy's henchman who is treated poorly and is going to turn against him and only follows his orders out of fear kind of thing. Yeah. So he convinced this general to bury Titanicus in the desert so that he wouldn't be able to find any moisture, because as soon as Titanicus touches moisture, he turns it into ice and can reform parts of his body he's lost. But actually, that saved Titanicus' life, burying him, because it took him out of the sun and kept him cool. So he tricked the Nazi fuck in that regard. But yeah, so they decide to make a plan. This Nazi fuck thinks he's a god, but don't all Nazis, you know? And he's like growing scorpion pincers and losing his hair, and he's mutating further and further and further and further. But then Wolf and the magnificent Nosferadon show up to fight Scurius, and, you know, they're having a little trouble, and also Serenity shows up to fight the Nazi fuck. Yeah, they gotta take down the Nazi fuck, who gets mutated even further into this horrific kaijin, right? And the fight with, honestly, the kaijin Nazi is kind of a better fight than the actual kaiju fight. It's really, really true. So we see this all go down, and eventually Scurius is actually taken out by Grafixus, who swoops in to fuck around and find out. And Scurius found out hard, but he's also going to find out what Titanicus's frostbeth feels like. And now that Scurius has been absorbed by Grafixus, there's this hybrid of the two kaiju, an action figure that I would buy, Titanic Creations, FYI. I can see why you wouldn't want to make it now. You want more people to buy the book. You don't want the spoiler. Don't worry, I won't show them the design. It's a really cool design, though, and this monster might actually be drawn better than all the other monsters. But Wolf has to convince Titanicus to fight alongside Nosferadon to stop this hybrid of the two villainous kaiju of the book. And I won't tell you exactly how they defeat it. I won't tell you everything. Like, yes, I'm walking you through the story. That's true. But I also want you to buy the book. But, of course, they do win, obviously. And there's a lot of weird mystical stuff going on that they have to take care of. But eventually, they do end up defeating the bad kaiju. Titanicus returns to the ocean, which is where it's heavily implied he's from Atlantis. And Nosferadon and Wolf fly off to go punch Nazis. And Vincent decides that he will actually join up with Serenity. But we also get a hint that Grafixus could still be out there. So they've really only beat Scurius. Eventually Grafixus will probably come back, but in a different form. So Scurius is actually the first kaiju featured in the back of the book. The back of the book has profiles for... Well, no, he's not the first one. Titanicus is. The back of the book has profiles for each kaiju and pictures of the action figures that you can get of them at Titanic... at Titanic Creation LLC's website. And, by the way, the read-up for Titanicus implies that Gorgo is part of this universe. Just keep that in mind. I know that they crowdfunded a Gorgo comic. I was gonna support it, but when they first did the crowdfunding, I didn't have the money. I hadn't been promoted yet, unfortunately. I do wish I'd had it. I don't know if that comic is still happening. I hope it does. And if it does happen, I actually don't know if it will be in continuity with this. I'm not even sure if it'll be in continuity with the Gorgo film or comics. It probably could be in continuity with the film, because I know they have the legal license to at least make a figure. I don't know if they have the license for comics and everything. I don't know. I guess they do, but they could make it in continuity with the Gorgo comics if they wanted. That shit's public domain. But we also get a read-up for Nosferadon, Scurius, and Grafixus with pictures of their action figures. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. But yeah, these read-ups do imply that Gorgo is part of the universe, and honestly, I'd be down for it. It's not like Gorgo's doing anything else, right? We got biographies and acknowledgments and stuff in the back, but that is mostly it for Soulbore. It's a very, very fun, well-thought-out, mystical, sci-fi, pulp kaiju adventure story. It is a very satisfying book to read. I just have one really big complaint. Every single image of the kaiju in this book is traced from the action figures. And I get using the action figures for reference, and I know this is an indie book, and I'm willing to give it a lot of slack. If you've seen my reviews of their super articulated figures, I gave those figures a lot of slack because there was some stuff I wouldn't have put up with from corporate figure makers that I put up with from Titanic Creations figures, because they're indie, they're learning. But I mean, we have people that have worked on other books in the past: Lost in Space, The Lost Adventures, World War Kaiju, Case File Arkham. People with experience worked on this, and once again, I get it. And look, talk to real artists. Artists trace all the time. That's kind of the secret of the art world. People trace all the time. I know Legendary Comics gets a lot of flack for it, but I think that's because the movie people make them trace. But I mean, these are independently owned characters. Patrick McEvoy, it says here, is an award-winning illustrator, designer, and art director with a long history drawing comics, games, book covers, and interiors and advertising. Previous comics work includes Case File Arkham series, graphic novels from Zero One Publishing, several issues of Lost in Space, The Lost Adventures from American Gothic Press, Starkweather Immortal from Archaea, an acclaimed series of covers for Boom Studios' Fall of Cthulhu, which I should read, and much more. Perhaps most importantly, for this project, Patrick illustrated the graphic novel World War Kaiju, which Mac McClintock read several years ago and inspired him to get in touch when the time came to do the book you are now reading. I'm reading this out of the biographies, by the way. Patrick would like to thank several people who helped make this book possible: Bobby Pinafale, coloring assistant, Tom Pinchuk, wonderful writing advice and support, and Ling Ann Stranhan, copy editing and input. And then Matt McClintock is the owner and operator of Titanic Creations, working on creating the story for the past 5 years, and is overjoyed to bring it to you. It's about loss. Mac lost many family members over the past few years, it says. Condolences, in all honesty, actual condolences. I am sorry about that. Both grandparents, and this book is dedicated to them, Albert Paul McClintock and Glenda May McClintock. So thanks to the both of you for inspiring your wonderful grandson to bring the love of kaiju to people and create a new universe in which we can all find great comfort and joy. That being said, the art is so noticeably traced, and if it was traced based on super articulated figures that you posed up in creative and dynamic poses, took the pictures of, and then traced over that, I wouldn't complain one single bit. Honestly, that just seems kind of like a smart thing to do, to be completely honest. But this is an experienced, allegedly award-winning illustrator, and they traced every kaiju? I mean, even the kaiju that doesn't have an action figure kind of seemed very static in its poses, but less so than some of the others. Titanicus's arms are always in the same position because this isn't drawn off the super articulated Titanicus that has yet to be released. This is drawn off of the Titanicus that has 4 points of articulation. And yes, there are some points where things have been kind of twisted and stuff, so they don't look as traced, but like when Nosferadon is flying in the Nosferadon issue 1 comic, it takes on like a whole new flying form pose. In this book, it almost looks more like it's floating because it's just in the action figure's pose, which is like standing on the ground. And you can see that its feet are flat, positioned like it's standing on the ground, but it's just in the air. Even when Titanicus is curled up at the end of the book, asleep in the ocean, it just looks like the action figure laying on its side. It's... Look, once again, I know this is an indie book. I know that they had to get it to the crowdfunding supporters and stuff in a timely fashion. I get that. But if there's a second graphic novel, which I hope there is, because I thoroughly enjoyed this book. If there is another graphic novel in this world, don't do this again. Being an indie comic publisher, and this being your first actual trade, your first graphic novel, I'm not counting the 2 little issues that come with the comics, which should have been included in this, but I can excuse it. You have to do better in the second one. You want to trace the super articulated Titanicus? Be my guest. Alright? You want to trace your super articulated Gorgo for that book, which it kind of looks like you did, based on the images that are out. Once again, go for it. I think that's a useful tool. Yeah, I mean, artists have used physical models, even living human beings, to base their drawings off of for centuries, okay? It's fine. But you gotta work a little harder on this. And I know this is done by a competent artist. The humans are great, and they're kept on model. The humans, I assume, aren't traced. Like, the art is good. It's very competent art until you get to the kaiju, who are just these big traced blocks in the middle of these very competently drawn humans. And I just don't know why. I feel like it must have been a time constraint thing. That's all I can think of, because if this is really, you know, an artist that has drawn a kaiju book before and has won an award and been illustrating for years, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to draw these kaiju. Yeah, of course, use the figures as references. Honestly, if I was an illustrator, seriously, let's say I was an illustrator and I was drawing Spider-Man. I would be posing up my Spider-Man action figure and drawing the poses. Would I be snapping pictures and tracing it? Probably not. I don't know. I'm not that kind of artist, okay? But I think a lot of people will excuse it for this. It's your first graphic novel. You're an indie publisher. You're doing your best with very little money. And anyone who reads this can tell that this book has a lot of heart. This story was well thought out. It's clearly full of passion. The people that worked on this definitely cared about it. 100% they did. It's a good book. It's a good book. Please don't trace them again. Please. I want the Titanic Creations universe to expand. I do. I want to learn the origins of Titanicus, you know? I want to see what kaiju they'll face next. I want to watch more Nazis get smashed, dude. Actually, you know, Nazis are kind of becoming a problem again, and I was going to upload this video in, like, June 2025, but with the way things are going, I might have to upload this video a little sooner. I think I'm going to actually postpone a different comic book review and maybe try to get this puppy up in, like, March. Maybe even February if I can. I probably can't pull off February, but I might actually try to get this up in March 2025 instead of June, which is when this is scheduled to go live. Because Nazis are, I don't know if you've noticed, they never left, but they weren't prominent. And I'm recording this the day after Steve Bannon did his little salute at CPAC. So, welcome to the world. And there's a part of me in my head that's just like, hey, maybe this comic about fighting Nazi fascists, where a Nazi fascist is not subtly and very literally turned into a monster. Maybe this review needs to go live a little sooner than I had planned. And yeah, I don't expect to get many views on this. My Nosferadon issue 0 video didn't get many views, nor did my Nosferadon figure review. It's not about the views. I just like talking about these things that I like, you know? It would be nice to have views. It'd be nice to be monetized. But maybe this story about fighting back against Nazi fascists needs to be uploaded a little sooner. And I think I just talked myself into it. So let's do that, huh? Let's do that. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for making it this far in. I try to do these more as like a podcast these days. I used to have visuals. I used to actually just physically record myself talking about the book. These days I do a static image. This is more of a listenable thing. Like, hey, listen to this while you clean your house kind of thing. I don't want to show a bunch of images from the book because I want you to read the book. I want you to read the book, people. But that is it. Thank you all very much for your support. Thank you, Titanic Creations, for the great graphic novel. I'm not saying thank you because they paid me to do this or because they sent it to me. Well, they did send it to me, but I paid full price for it. Actually, that's not true. I think I got it on sale. But I did pay for it. They didn't pick me out or anything. I'm not famous. I mean, who do I look like? Monster Island Buddies? Come on. But that's it. Thank you all once again. And hopefully there will be a sequel that we can talk about in the future. Have a good one. Bye for now.